Right, so we have more bad news, unfortunately, coming out of Canada. And by that, we have Justin Trudeau coming out and announcing the immigration is going to be increased. For what reasons, I have no idea, but we'll talk a little bit about that. But nonetheless, this is from Spencer Fernando, and he says, with many Canadians out of jobs, the Liberals plan to bring in over 1.2 million new people in the next 3 years, making the job situation even worse for Canadian citizens. Now, the first thing to bring up here is what reason can you possibly argue that we need to increase immigration, let alone keep it the same, but increase it? Like, what reason do we have to do it? I really don't know. The old arguments for immigration no longer stand true. The only way that it is reasonable to have high levels of immigration, the only reason that it's anywhere close to reasonable, is if the unemployment rate is so low that we can't even fill all the jobs, right? But that's not even close to the case. That wasn't even the case prior to the pandemic, right? Like we had 5 6, I think we had about 6% unemployment prior to the pandemic. Not to mention we have provinces like Alberta that are like 7 8%. Now again, Kenny has done the right thing and ended the temporary foreign worker program, but they should be doing everything in their power. And again, I don't know if they have the power to do it, but they should be doing everything in their power to make it so not one immigrant should be coming to Alberta or Canada for that matter, until the unemployment rate is down. And on top of that, I think that also we shouldn't have immigration either until median wages start to go up. Because that's the other big problem when it comes to immigration is that I mean, when it comes to immigration, it exists for two main reasons. Let's be honest about it. The whole we need to have compassion and we care about the poor people is complete BS. That is such a terrible, terrible idea. And people who say that are either incredibly ignorant and evil, or the average person, I would say, is just incredibly oblivious. They're just ignorant as can possibly be. For the simple reason that, for starters, they don't care about the poor, right? These are the same people that, number one, they're less likely to give money to charity than the people that they claim hate the poor, which doesn't make any sense. And number two, the policies they implement don't help the poor. Right? Like look at California, look at New York. These are the states that have the highest taxes and all these virtue signaling progressive politicians that claim to care so much about the poor. Well, look what happens. They have the places that have the worst homelessness, right? So again, this idea that they care about the poor is absolute garbage. It's absolute garbage. If they were just honest, if they were just honest about it and said, yeah, we just want to push socialism, we want to push globalism, I would at least respect them. They're still wrong. It doesn't change the fact that they're still wrong, but at the very least, they're being honest. And this is something that I can't stand about politicians and individuals that talk about this kind of stuff these days, is that they're not being honest. They're lying. So that's the first thing I wanted to bring up. But again, the point being is that I've yet to hear, or I've yet to hear a good argument for why we need mass immigration at this point. Like, why do we need it, right? And here's the thing: let's just say that the unemployment rate is very low, wages are going up. Um, can we afford it? Like, this is the other thing too. Like, and this is one thing that I've always said about the left is that if we have very low unemployment, if we have growing wages, and you can find a way to finance your whatever plan it is without increasing the deficit or taxes, by all means, like by all means, if you want to give away free healthcare and you can do it without raising taxes or running bigger deficits, by all means. I mean, I still think it's wrong, but by all means, at least I can agree with that. But they can never do that, right? They can never do that. And like I've been bringing up over the last, I mean, basically the last 6 months or so, people don't realize just how bad things are going to be coming out of this. Like, the average person is ignorant enough. Again, they're probably not people watching this, which is the worst part about it, but nonetheless, um, they don't realize that they think that we can just flip things on and off like a light switch, right? Like that we have these lockdown measures going on right now, and whenever the government thinks that we're through it, they can just flip a switch, and we can go back to normal lives, right? Like a normal economy, which isn't going to happen. That's not how it works, right? We have a government that's running a deficit nearing $500 billion this year, and they're increasing immigration. What happens when you increase immigration? Well, guess what? Immigrants from the third world are twice as likely to be on welfare. This just means that, the deficit is high partially because of all this virus spending, but nonetheless, the deficit it's going to continue to go up and up and up more. I mean, immigration, like I say, immigration exists for two main reasons: cheap labor and votes for the left. And this is why the left is always the most pro-immigration, and why the right is always, at least the mainstream politicians, are always tacitly for immigration, because the big corporations love it. So again, both sides like that, and it's votes for the left. So the left likes that, and a lot of the mainstream right wingers, they genuinely believe that you can change these people's minds, which is absolutely insane, at least on average. Some people will change their minds. Like I say, there is some of these immigrants that aren't left-wing voters, but that doesn't change the fact that the clear majority of them are, right? And it's going to be like that for generations. It's not going to change. So that is the thing. And, the last thing I always bring up, too, is that you have the left that always likes to talk about how much they're against the big corporations and the corporate corruption and the corporate cronyism and the corporations exploiting people, but they don't care about the corporations supporting immigration largely for the fact that it's cheap labor, right? Like, they don't care about that, which is absolutely insane. Like, I don't know how they can possibly in good faith make these arguments. I really don't. Now, the reality is that their arguments are not shrouded in reality. They're entirely shrouded in political power, right? Like, these are votes for the left, and they're shrouded in emotions, right? You know, it's emotions, because this is the problem: is that I would love to be able to bring these people in. The problem is that we can't afford it, right? We can't afford it. And this is the other thing, too, that the left likes to talk about all the time, is that, oh, well, immigrants aren't more likely to be on welfare, which they are. But if they're not, okay, well, then let's just come up with a plan saying we can't bring in immigrants who are going to end up on welfare, or at the very least likely to end up on welfare. They're always against those policies. And why is that? It's because they know they're wrong. So again, there's no debate on these topics, because both sides agree. The left just won't be honest about it. So anyway, that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The next thing is from Rocco Galati, and he says, Twitter has just taken down posts depicting riots in Naples over virus measures. Now, again, many riots and protests have came up in Europe, because a lot of these places have relocked down. And again, that's it's insane that they're relocking down, because there's no reason for it. The first lockdowns were a miserable fail. There was no reason for it. Looking back on them, they were complete bunk. There was no reason for them, and they're just going to double down. And this is why you have to be against all these lockdown measures. I don't care what it is, with maybe one or two rare exceptions. You need to be against any form of lockdown measures. Like I say, maybe there's one or two exceptions to that rule, because it is a slippery slope. It is a slippery slope, because 2 weeks to flatten the curve turned into months to flatten the curve. We're just going to have a mask mandate for a month or two turned into you're going to be wearing masks for at least the next 6 months. At least where I'm at, and I'm at an area where there isn't even that many cases. So again, it's pure and utter insanity. It's pure and utter insanity. Everybody should be up in arms about this, but the problem is that most people are too much of a sheep to figure it out. So anyway, the next thing to bring up here is from Kellyanne Conway, talking about Biden in 1993 pushing crime bill, warned of predators on our streets who were beyond the pale. CNN Politics. Now again, the thing I wanted to bring up here is just the pure hypocrisy when it comes to this kind of stuff. If this was Trump or any conservative who had done something like this, they would be viciously attacked as, oh, you're a terrible racist, you're not even redeemable whatsoever. But when you're on the left, nobody cares, right? When you're on the left, nobody cares. It's just such insanity that the double standard is to this degree, and that's obviously why I'm talking about it. So anyway, it's just something I wanted to bring up. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is from Clay Travis here. And he says, I'm white and I tell my kids to shut up if the police stop them and do everything the officer says, period. The idea that only black parents have these conversations with their kids is just a flagrant lie. Now, again, this is something that came up at the debate, but nonetheless, this is a complete lie, right? Like, the reason why blacks get shot more by the police, and it's not nearly as disproportionate as what people think, is because they commit more crime, right? Like, it's because they commit more crime. When you adjust for the likelihood to commit crime, there's no discernible difference. And one of the main reasons why you know this, I mean, one of many reasons, is black police officers, the rate is almost no different than white police officers. So if it's racism that's the driving force here, then why aren't black police officers doing it less, right? And the simple reason is because blacks are just more likely to commit crimes, right? And even when you, and the other reason we know this is when they do the crime victimization surveys, the numbers match. They basically ask people, were you a victim of a crime? If so, when, how, what was the race, age, sex of the perpetrator, all the details and stuff. And number one, they're anonymous, so that's safe to assume they're rather reliable. And the other thing too is that there's black people tend to be victims of black people committing crime. So to make the argument that they're unreliable would be to claim that black victims of crimes are lying when they have no personal benefit in doing so, right? So the idea that they're wrong, I think, is complete bunk. So again, the reason why blacks have more interactions with police is because they commit more crime. It's very simple. And the numbers clearly bear that out too. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but the numbers clearly bear it out, right? So that's what I wanted to talk about. But again, like you say, he says it's just a flagrant lie. And the problem here is that it's coming from a place of these politicians wanting to push race baiting. That is the goal. They want to race bait. And the reason they do it is because they view it as benefiting them politically. And again, when these media outlets and politicians can race bait, it's good for ratings, right? Like talking about these blacks getting killed by police, it's great for ratings, right? It's great for ratings. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links in the description. Give me a follow on those other platforms. I also have Patreon and an email address for e-transfer. If you'd like to support me, you can do that. But the main thing would be make sure you hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.